Today in the battle arena, we will witness a battle for the ages. For the first time in this series, we will have not one, but two Godzillas in the battle arena. The first, a titan that throughout the ages has earned the title of Alpha with Blood. A giant reptilian that does not know retreat or surrender. The one and only legendary Godzilla. Its opponent, one of the most terrifying monsters ever seen, with a biology so strange and volatile that it could counter just about anything thrown at him. This wasn't an ordinary Gojira. This is Shin Godzilla. In this battle analysis, we will go in depth, analyzing their weapons, armor, resistance, abilities, and biological attributes that will determine the winner of this battle. So make sure to stay with us to the end as we reveal which of these titans deserves the title of Deadliest Godzilla. Before we enter the analysis platform, it is imperative that we determine the physical proportions of these two monsters. Let's begin with Shin Godzilla. This particular version of Godzilla comes in many forms, constantly evolving into different forms that counter any obstacles or oppressive elements that this kaiju would face. For this battle, we will be using Shin Godzilla's fourth form, known as Kamakura-san. This form measured 389 feet in height, more than 30 feet taller than legendary Godzilla in 2014, and weighed over 92,000 metric tons. A colossal kaiju of this size would have outsized the earlier 2014 rendition of legendary's Godzilla. Therefore, we will be using the larger, bulkier version of Godzilla featured in King of the Monsters. This time, legendary Godzilla measures a whopping 394 feet in height, just 5 feet taller than Shin. Additionally, this kaiju weighed 99,634 US tons. But what is this in metric tons? By converting these different units of measurement, we see that Shin Godzilla, although shorter in size, is actually the heavier kaiju. Proportionally speaking, however, these two are now almost the same. Now that we have a clear picture of how our contestants will be sized up for this simulation, let us now enter the analysis platform. Resistance. When it comes to the amount of damage that these kaiju can take, we need to take into account the types of weapons used to counter both of these creatures. Shin Godzilla brings a body covered in thick, aberrated hide, capable of withstanding a ton of firepower. In this scene, a whole squadron of Type 10 tanks, AH-64 Apaches, and 1Z copters rained a barrage of continuous fire on this creature. The result? Shin didn't even flinch. But how does legendary Godzilla react to this type of weaponry? In 2014, Godzilla was attacked by a barrage of fire, and as you can clearly see, legendary Goji actually does react to these sorts of weapons, in contrast to Shin, who didn't react. The only weapons capable of piercing Shin were the massive ordnance penetrators, which went right through Shin's dorsals, causing him to bleed and roar in immense pain, meaning that this particular area of Shin is vulnerable to damage. But there are a few other factors we need to consider. If you have seen Godzilla King of the Monsters, you will recall the scene where Ghidorah picked up Godzilla and dropped him from the stratosphere. Upon further research, we found two very important things. One, upon re-entry to the lower levels of the atmosphere, this temperature can reach 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And two, note that Godzilla landed on his dorsals. Upon landing, we can see that none of these dorsals broke, meaning that unlike Shin, these can withstand immense amounts of shock damage. Furthermore, we witnessed Godzilla take a nuke to the face. In the film featuring Shin Godzilla, this is the type of weapon with a blast strong enough to kill Shin. Or that's what they thought, at least. Legendary Godzilla's resistance is admittedly a bit strange. For a titan that can withstand nukes, it is only reasonable for this thing to have a thick hide that's capable of withstanding any type of trauma. But this is negated thanks to the Mutos penetrating Godzilla's skin and Kong's axe penetrating his thigh. But in this particular battle, both titans will need armor capable of withstanding atomic weaponry, atomic shocks, and high levels of heat. And by considering all of the evidence, we find that legendary Godzilla checks most of these boxes, giving him the edge in resistance. Regeneration. Because this battle will feature damage unlike any other battle seen in this channel, we must take into account the regenerative pace of these two kaiju. Shin Godzilla possesses the capability to heal relatively quickly. The prime example of this is the moment when the ordnance penetrators managed to injure Godzilla. Upon further observation, Shin managed to recover almost instantly, and on top of that, deploy a weapon right where the injury was inflicted. This was thanks to its genetic composition that allowed it to regenerate this fast. More on this later. Legendary Godzilla also has regenerative capabilities, but they behave a little differently. Unlike its opponent, Legendary Goji's regeneration and healing is much slower and doesn't happen immediately. On the contrary, this process of healing injured areas can take anywhere from a few hours to even years depending on the type of wound and where. Once injured by the axe, Godzilla is seen with an orange scab-like covering where the wound was originally inflicted. But another injury that Godzilla could have taken a while to recuperate from was its dorsals. Upon getting them destroyed by the Muto Prime's sonic roar, these would have taken a while to regenerate fully. Both of these titans can heal over time, but in a 1v1 situation, healing on the spot is imperative. Not to mention that Shin evolves while it heals, bringing back a superior organ better equipped to counter the weapon that inflicted the damage. For this reason, the edge for regeneration will go to Shin Godzilla. Battle Intelligence. Those of you who have seen both of these creatures in action will know that these two behave very differently. Throughout its film, Shin Godzilla has been seen as an animal that behaves on pure instinct. At times, this creature showed absolutely no signs of thought processing. But what about its fourth form? This creature's way of fighting wasn't led too much by actual thought processes, but by reactions to the surrounding elements, and it was pretty effective. To illustrate this, we need to see how this creature behaved during its evolution. Once it found it difficult to breathe, this thing adopted a more terrestrial method of inhaling. If it found it difficult to move through objects, this thing now developed legs. Once airborne objects were the next big threat, this thing countered with weapons that could counter them effectively. The point is, although this creature's brain does have something to do with the way it evolves, its fight methodology is determined by what the opponent does or what the obstacles are. A cause and response sort of paradigm, not much critical thinking. Legendary Godzilla is practically the complete opposite. Instead of relying on its evolutionary traits for survival, this titan relies on its cunning and, most importantly, its battle experience. Allow us to remind you that Legendary Godzilla has been alive for millions of years, and in the world of Monster vs. Titans, living this long means that you have survived many battles and wars against many different types of foes, adding to Godzilla's repertoire of combat methodologies. We'd like to think that Godzilla's mind processes are led by an instinctive compass, a hardwired personality backed up by its critical thinking abilities that allow it to develop strategies and counters to any incoming attacks. Examples of this were shown with how he managed to kill both male and female Mutos in different ways, aiming for Ghidorah's most vulnerable body parts and the ability to outmatch Kong in a purely physical confrontation. By taking all of this into account, it's clear that in this particular battle, the edge for intelligence during combat will go to Legendary Godzilla. Overall strength. Most incarnations of Godzillas are usually represented as unstoppable forces of nature. But what about these two? In its live-action appearance, Shin Godzilla was the type of kaiju that would literally burst through all sorts of urban landscape, densely packed buildings, and power through missile fire. But where is all this strength concentrated? Upon further observation, it's clear that most of its muscular density can be found in the lower portion of its body, more specifically its extremely thick legs and very large tail. The advantage of having such a build has been beneficial to not just Shin, but Legendary Godzilla as well. That's right, both of these kaiju have thicker legs and a tail that can be used as a third limb, which comes in handy when it comes to stability. The best example of this is how Godzilla soaked Kong's punch to the face on the carrier. The real reason why Godzilla did not get knocked down was the fact that it had 3 points of contact with the ground. Unlike Kong, whose smaller legs did not help him stay upright against a swipe from a smaller limb. Speaking of which, when it comes to upper body strength, Legendary Godzilla comes equipped with a bulkier upper body. In contrast, Shin Godzilla's upper arms are much smaller and had little to no role in the destruction of these cities. So who wins the edge? While it is true that most of the lower muscular density of Shin Godzilla surpasses Legendary's, this Godzilla's larger build on its upper part of his body and his constant reliance on physical strength in combat gives him the edge when it comes to overall strength. Terrain compatibility. Which of these two kaiju can fight well in any arena? Shin Godzilla has had 4 forms to evolve into a kaiju that can handle a terrestrial arena pretty well. But its most important ability is not how it moves, but how it detects threats. In the film, it is mentioned that this kaiju has a phased array radar, which allows this kaiju to sense things in any location in a given radius. This thing will be able to detect any incoming weapon, even if its scope of vision isn't in front of its target. But is this enough to win the edge? Although Legendary Godzilla does not possess a similar defense mechanism, this kaiju has the ability to locate any monster on the surface of the Earth. In terms of actual terrain, Godzilla has proven to be an apt swimmer, capable of fighting in both water and land. No matter where this battle takes place, legendary Godzilla will hold the edge when it comes to terrain compatibility. Locomotion. This factor will be important when facing off against a titan of these proportions. Throughout its film, Shin Godzilla moves at a sluggish pace, as we've never seen him take off and run at high speeds. In terms of agility, this kaiju was also quite static, with only its tail as the most maneuverable part of its body. That said, it is possible that this kaiju didn't need to move fast at all. If humanity threw a special weapon that required Shin to evolve into a faster-moving creature, then it would have probably manipulated its body shape to counter such weaponry. But in its fourth phase, Shin Godzilla was not fast. Legendary Godzilla, on the other hand, went from being a slow-moving creature in 2014 to a much faster and agile combatant in Godzilla vs. Kong. Although being a larger creature, this thing is now capable of literally running and even pouncing on a victim after being on all fours. The way legendary Godzilla uses its weapons, such as its tail, is a clear indicator that this Godzilla moves in ways that Shin can't. For this reason, the edge for locomotion will be given to legendary Godzilla. Now, let's get to some weapons. Melee weaponry. Shin Godzilla has been a kaiju that relied on other types of weaponry rather than physical prowess. The closest thing we got to physical damage was simply having this kaiju tear through cityscapes and nothing else. Though to be fair, using its body as a weapon was not warranted at all, since there was no other opponent for Shin to use them on. But what if it did? We will divide this melee analysis into 3 parts: jaws, limbs, and tail. If we compare both of these creatures' heads side by side, we find that Shin Godzilla has the more irregular shaped teeth, and a lot of them. This jaw goes as far as unhinging, giving it more biting surface area, but at the expense of bite force. The problem with Shin's head, however, is that it's awkwardly placed on its neck. In order for this head to be at all effective to be used in melee combat, this head would have to be placed in a more obtuse angle along its spine. This new posture would allow Shin to bring down its head and bite with more effectiveness, similar to legendary Godzilla. Moving down to the limb arrangements, we see that legendary Godzilla's arms are much larger, stronger, and oriented in a way that can be used for close combat. Shin's arms are pronated upward, making it more uncomfortable for it to be used for fighting. Legendary and Shin's legs are relatively similar, but in the past, we have seen that legendary Goji has used its legs as a weapon and used for finishing maneuvers against many other kaiju. The last weapon to review is the tail. Here's where things get interesting. Making up more than half of its body length, Shin Godzilla's tail is equipped with enough mass to knock down almost any foe that stands in front of it. This tail alone is taller than legendary Goji himself. Even though it has a smaller tail, legendary Goji actually does use this as a weapon, even killing the male Muto with it thanks to its sharp dorsals and tremendous swing force. Again, we will reiterate that we have not seen any of Shin's melee weaponry in action, and because it lacks experience in the use of these weapons, legendary Godzilla takes a critical edge when it comes to melee weaponry. Now, let's get to the real damage. Atomic weaponry. The contestant who wins the edge in this category will obtain it because it was the most effective in this particular battle. Let's begin with Shin Godzilla. This Titan's atomic capability is not to be underestimated in the slightest. This kaiju's signature weapon is known as the Condensed Atomic Heat Ray, a blast of atomic energy so powerful that it is seen cutting entire skylines in half thanks to its intense temperatures. To get to this point in temperature will take time though. Let's rewind a little bit before this condensation of energy. We see here that before Shin was able to condense this fire stream to its purple hue, this first started as a black smoke that was rapidly fired from this animal's vocal orifice. This was then ignited by its thermal flame and then condensed into this deadly weapon. This does not end here. Apart from being able to release this ray from its mouth, this creature has another vestigial underdeveloped pair of mandibles on its tail. This was a result of this animal's constant evolution that allowed it to develop an extra outlet for this energy. If this wasn't enough, this animal was also capable of releasing energy through its spine, allowing more of this deadly energy into a wider area. This weapon can also be aimed with accuracy thanks to its phased array radar. How does legendary Godzilla respond? This Godzilla is equipped with one of the most destructive atomic blasts ever seen, capable of reaching 500,000 degrees Celsius and with the explosive power of an atomic bomb. This weapon was used to dig a hole through the Earth and reach the nether regions of the planet. But what about its dorsals? As seen in the film Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla was able to emit an atomic pulse. This pulse was exponentially more powerful thanks to Godzilla's thermonuclear state. Will Godzilla hit this state in this battle? No. This was caused by two things: Serizawa's nuke and Mothra's sacrifice. Godzilla won't have any of these in this battle, but the pulse itself can be used. In Godzilla Aftershock, we see that this pulse was used to expel a hazardous amount of energy, which allowed Godzilla to destroy the Muto Prime. So, which of these weapons is the most effective against the opponent? By observing how this atomic ray reacts to what it hits, it's evident that this ray within itself has more destructive power. Yes, legendary Godzilla can blast a hole through the planet, but if this destructive power was aimed at the ground, it would have done the same thing. But what really gives Shin the edge is the capability to fire a very destructive beam from many places: its tail and mouth, or its dorsals. Well, legendary Goji is able to spew this only from its mouth and its pulse only while Shin is at a closer range. This one is very, very close, but for combat purposes, Shin Godzilla takes the edge when it comes to the effectiveness of these weapons. X Factor. There is something very important we need to consider before putting Shin Godzilla in the arena: its genetic architecture. In the film, we were introduced to the theory that this creature's genome is so advanced that it is 8 times larger than human DNA, explaining why this creature was able to evolve right in front of your eyes and adapt to counter almost anything thrown at him. This does not end here. Taking into account the fact that this animal can regenerate, it was mentioned that this creature could have regenerated entire new forms from parts of its body. Similar to a starfish, you can cut these guys up but end up with more starfish. But this regeneration isn't instantaneous either. It will take some time for the healing to occur, but it also won't last days or weeks either. Once all of its atomic energy is depleted, it will have taken this animal almost 2 weeks to replenish its energy. The only way to effectively get rid of this monster is with a blast with a shock so powerful that it could disintegrate all of its matter. Legendary Godzilla's X Factor is in a more psychological or behavioral realm. Given that Godzilla is arguably the most arrogant titan in the Monsterverse, it's clear that whenever Godzilla faces another kaiju, he expects the opponent to submit or face his wrath. In this case, facing Shin Godzilla would be a confusing experience. Once seeing that Shin does not submit, Godzilla will go straight for the kill. Whether this is a good or bad thing, we are about to find out. We are now ready to reveal who will be the winner of this fight. Shin Godzilla, with its abnormal biology, wins the edge on regeneration and a close edge on atomic weaponry. Legendary Godzilla, with its battle-hardened build, wins the edge on resistance, battle intelligence, strength, terrain adaptability, locomotion, and melee weaponry, with no battle attributes shared between the two titans. After compiling all of our data, we determined this is going to take a while to explain, but bear with us. The simulation will now display the results in 3 phases. Number 1. The stats speak for themselves. Upon compiling all of this information, the first technical winner of this confrontation was legendary Godzilla, with the battle attributes carrying more weight being locomotion and melee weaponry. Because Shin Godzilla has little or no experience using melee weapons, and considering the fact that its close-range weapons were inferior, this cost it its life when facing a charging legendary Godzilla. Even at a distance, by the time legendary Goji reached the body of Shin Godzilla, Shin wouldn't have condensed its atomic ray fast enough before Godzilla got near to it, or blasted it with its own atomic ray. Even if Shin did load it on time, Godzilla's corporal resistance would have kicked in to withstand this heat for enough time until it managed to close the distance and turn this into a close confrontation. Once Godzilla finishes off Shin and walks away, as he normally does, this would have not been the end of it. Remember that this is not the way to finish off this kaiju. You need to light up everything, and Godzilla never really learned this. Number 2, Shin Godzilla begins to regenerate once again. Remember that there is no clear limit to what this thing can regenerate and evolve to, which leads us to number 3, the next confrontation. The simulations in this channel normally conclude with one clear winner and one clear loser, with the loser being completely dead. This time, Shin was defeated, but not completely killed, allowing his regenerative properties to kick in again. Now, Godzilla faces a different kaiju with different corporal attributes that can better counter his speed and physical prowess. perhaps even 2 Shin Godzillas. The simulation ends here since we have absolutely no data on this alternative 5th form. In the film, Shin Godzilla's 5th form were these humanoid creatures that evolved to better counter humanity in a more effective method. This was halted, obviously. By understanding Shin's biology, it is more than evident that had it faced legendary Godzilla, its 5th form would have been something completely different. A battle between legendary Godzilla and this 5th form is completely up for grabs, and we won't know exactly how it will go for legendary Godzilla. Perhaps a 6th or even 7th form would have been needed to finally defeat legendary Goji. In the past, Godzilla did face a kaiju of similar attributes. This kaiju could regenerate from severed pieces of its body, and the only way to get rid of it was to incinerate the entire Titan. This was achieved by dropping a nuke on this creature, making it one of the only kaiju that Godzilla couldn't kill. Same applies here. This was a strange outcome, but only because we are dealing with a strange creature. Did legendary Godzilla technically win in your opinion? Or does Shin Godzilla's biology grant it an ultimate victory? Let us know your opinions in the comments. For more fun kaiju documentaries like these, please like this video, subscribe, and go check out our merch if you haven't yet. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next battle.